Okay, thanks everyone. Welcome back. We kept that break pretty quick. I am conscious I'm standing between you and the bar at this stage. I promise I'll keep this very quick. Eoin Killeen is my name. I'm a solutions architect at KX. I'm going to take you through a very quick demo of our new product, KDB Insights Enterprise. Show you how we can use it to build some data engineering pipelines in a drag and drop manner. And we will take a very quick look at the architecture, who's it for, what can it do, and then jump straight into the live demo. So KDB Insights Enterprise is our cloud-first data platform. There are 3 tiers to the Insights product stack Connor touched on earlier. They build on top of each other, onion style in the top right here. The reason for the tiers is to facilitate customers who want the flexibility to build their own solutions, and then also offer more rapidly deployable off-the-shelf options for common usage patterns. So KDB Insights on the left is our time series data engine. This is the foundation of the Insights product stack. It's built on the latest version of KDB+, which I think pretty much everyone here is familiar with. This lets us ingest and analyze vast amounts of data, which can be served from on-prem as well as now from cloud object storage. It lets us tier our data across various storage media so we can strike a balance between storage cost and performance. It brings new levels of interoperability with other technologies, in particular Python, which we saw from Andrew and Nathan. It also has ANSI SQL support, new REST client and server, and packaging and logging utilities. The microservices are a set of off-the-shelf components built on top of the KDB Insights core. These are designed to abstract away your common design patterns in time series data processing. So you're reading of data, you're saving of it to disk, you're transitioning through its life cycle from memory to disk to object storage, as well as serving that data up to end users via a scalable gateway interface. So the plumbing, the infrastructure, that's all taken care of. You can bring your own logic, drop that in, and then focus on the value-adding pieces. On the right-hand side, at the top of the chain, is KDB Insights Enterprise. So this is our end-to-end application. This is built on top of Insights and the microservices, and it uses Kubernetes to manage them. It has its own web-based UI. We'll take a look at that in just a minute. That's where you can drag and drop your components, your readers, your operators, and your writers to form your data pipelines. So why choose one of these over the other? Well, the target audience of KDB Insights Core and the microservices is developers and data engineers who need flexibility. They want to build their own components or to migrate an existing plant. So if you've got a KDB Plus plant, maybe on-prem already, and you want a more scalable architecture, or for cost savings around cloud storage. So there's a couple of motivations. These users generally will either be already familiar with KDB or they'll be happy to learn it. On the other hand, the audience for KDB Insights Enterprise is more geared towards data scientists, client application developers, anyone who needs to run analytics on large amounts of time series data. They may or may not already know KDB and Q. If they do know it and they want to use it, they can absolutely bring that and apply it to their workloads. But if they don't, that's fine too. They can use SQL and Python. So while KDB Insights Core and the microservices start to lower the technical barriers to entry by opening up access to your data and standardizing your individual components, KDB Insights Enterprise takes that a step further and standardizes the actual infrastructure that your plan runs on. It's not a no-code solution, so it is still a product for technically minded users, but it's designed to be easier to adopt for people coming in from a more general data science background. So we'll take a very quick look at a high-level logical diagram. This is a typical financial services use case for KDB Insights Enterprise. We've got data of varying velocities, your historical, your real-time, your reference data coming in here on the left. It's being merged and combined so we can run analytics on your data flows in the context of each other. So this is useful for anomaly detection, alert publication, or the example we look at just now is signal generation. The logic within and behind these analytics and the decision models can be defined using your own Python code, your SQL queries, And then the infrastructure required to actually implement those calculations and spin up the infrastructure behind the scenes, that's all taken care of without the user needing to do anything. So your result is that data scientists and quants can bring the tools that they're already familiar with and deploy those via KDB Insights Enterprise into a scalable plant. Once you've got your data flow, your pipeline in place to visualize and publish the results of that, users can create interactive reports so that your business users who maybe don't necessarily need to know how the models were arrived at, they can still interact with the models, they can access the results, they can change the inputs, see what happens. So this allows you to do some very rapid prototyping and deployment of business applications, your pre-trade, your post-trade analytics, slippage benchmarks, P&L, and so on. So we're going to cut over to an example here with the live application, and we'll take a look at a very simple trading strategy. So this is the front end of KDB Insights Enterprise. I'm going to open up a finished report first of all. So this is a view on your data. And the strategy being plotted here is a fairly trivial one. It's a very simple long, short, moving average crossover. It's comparing two different lengths of moving averages and generating a signal when they cross over each other. So it's fairly straightforward, but it's a simple one to visualize. And you can think of this as insert your logic here, basically. If we want to work backwards and see how we can actually create this kind of application from building blocks, from components, what are the fundamentals that we need? We need a way to read streaming data, first of all. So we've got a raw trade price coming in here, the purple line. We need a way to apply some analytics to that data, so apply some logic, enrich that data somehow, do something useful with it to apply your business models and generate some insight from it. Finally, then, you need a way to visualize it. And we'll do a very quick rewind to the start of that building block and then fast forward to building this kind of a view on your data. So if I cut back to the landing page of the platform here, this is the front page, and we get two shortcuts at the top. You've got build a database wizard and import data. Build a database does pretty much what it says on the tin. You get to give your database a name, and you can pick one of these t-shirt sizes as a starting point. So this lets you very quickly get started with some sensible defaults. You don't need to spend time speccing out every little detail about your database, but you can create your schema here if you want. You can do a point and click approach to this, and you can also version your database config in a file external to the platform and drop that in. So I won't take you through the entire creation of a database here. I'm going to cut across to one we made earlier, and let's look at how we can import some data into that database. So the import wizard lets us pick from a library of import options. We've got some streaming options, some batch options here. On the streaming side, we've got Kafka and MQTT, and then on batch or on single one-off loads, you've got your typical hyperscaler object storage, as well as Postgres SQL servers. The example we're looking at here is streaming trade data over Kafka. So I'm going to pick the Kafka reader here and set a broker and a topic. If I hit next, it asks me, well, what format is the data coming in? It's a JSON in this case. We've also got some other decoders, and we will be continuing to add to a set of readers and components here over time. Once we've decoded our JSON, we have a table format, and we can pick from the schemas that we've already loaded and created in our database earlier. So we can pick a particular database and a table within that database to write my data into. I can change the types here if I like. There are the defaults here I'm going to accept, and then decide what I actually want to do with that data. So into a particular database, into a particular table within that database. I'm now presented with a visual representation of a data pipeline. So based on the inputs that I put into the wizard, I've got a set of nodes that are representative of the flow of data through your plant. So on the left-hand side, we've got a reader bringing data in from Kafka. It's being decoded from JSON, and we're applying a schema. The result of that is then being sent into the KDB Insights database. So if you want to modify that before you go ahead and deploy that, you can delete these connections between the nodes. You can drop in additional nodes. Conceptually, what we're doing is we're assembling a set of readers, writers, and operators in between. The writers have, what you would expect. You can send back out streaming data. You can write to a database. And the functions in between can do pretty much anything you want to do in terms of online data processing. So you've got your map nodes here, which let you drop in arbitrary function logic. You've got machine learning models down towards the bottom. And we've also got some timer windows. So if you want to run an analytic on a timer or on a sliding window and so on, we've got lots of options for that. So I'm going to cut across to a pipeline that we made earlier. This demo algo pipeline is demonstrative of a fairly simple use case. It's taking in raw trade data, again from Kafka, decoding it, tidying up some inputs. You can drop your own code in here. This one is using Qcode. The version that's going out this month lets you drop in pure Python nodes. So you can bring your own end-to-end Python data pipeline in here. We're splitting the pipeline here and persisting the raw trade data. So the data as it comes in is persisted for reference, and then we're also adding some analytics. So on a timing window, we're going to add some moving averages. And this is where we're starting to generate our own logic, apply our own logic to the data, and then write that to the database. So how do we decide? We've just plugged in some arbitrary moving average windows in here. How do we decide what the best values are to plug in here? Once the data is written to the database, or raw data that is, we have a few options around querying the data. So the query tab within Insights lets us query that data in a couple of different ways. We've got a query tab which gives us an API-based access. So you can create key value pairs, pick a table from your database, apply a start and end time, and any number of filters and aggregations. That's going to be executed in a very lightweight way where the data lives, with the results being aggregated and brought back client-side. The SQL tab, I think Nathan touched on the SQL support earlier. This is applying your SQL query in a federated way at a gateway level to execute your query at the database where a particular table lives, and bring that back into your workspace. So you've got a query environment workspace, which is away from your production database. So for ad hoc type user queries, if you're exploring the data, you're maybe prototyping a model, backtesting your code across historical data, you can do that away from the production processes without fear of interrupting your API-driven, your application-level access to your data. Finally, of course, we have queue support across the top here, and this lets you bring the standard queue that we know and love and execute that directly against your database. So moving from top to bottom here, the top area of the interface is your query. So this is how you get access to your data. You save that in an output variable here. And then down in my workspace in the middle, I have a toggle over on the right-hand side here. So this lets me toggle between Qcode and Python code. And we're using PyKX again here. I'm not going to go into much detail on it here. We've seen a pretty impressive demo, I think, from Andrew and Nathan. But the approach here is that we're taking the result from our SQL query, we're converting the result set back into a pandas data frame, and then using pandas functions to run the simple rolling averages on the data. We can then swap across to queue mode and continue the analysis over there. So you can pick up where you left off in Python and very quickly prototype some visuals. So whatever your strategy is doing versus the benchmark, for example, in this case, you can see how the performance changes over time. So you can iterate over your code this way. You can try out different parameters, different inputs, see which one is optimal, and then cut back over to your pipeline. That's where your parameters go. So, okay, we're happy with the result here. We're going to go with 10 and 60 for our moving averages, for example. When we go to deploy that pipeline, we have a few options. This is where the scalability of the underlying microservices really comes in. So we can specify an upper and a lower bound on the number of worker processes, for example. So if we have a data source, such as Kafka, that lets us partition topics, we can split your feed in that way and scale the processing of this data as it comes in. We also have an option here, so rather than outright deploying your pipeline, you can run a test deploy, and that will let you read a couple of messages from your reader, trace that through the pipeline and visually inspect it as it goes, so you can see, well, where is my data maybe diverging from my expectations. Once the data is persisted to your database, once you've run some analytics, you've got something ticking in. Now you want to build some visuals on it and get a feel for what's actually happening in there. So if I cut back to the view that we started with here, we've got a design and preview toggle mode here, and this lets us swap between the finished product and the actual document canvas that we're working on. So we've got a set of components on the left-hand side here. We've got everything from simple data grids to charts, to inputs and outputs and radio buttons. There's lots of different options there for you to pick values. So this lets you create interactive reports. It's not just a query that you set and forget. You can actually change the selected values here, edit your queries on the fly to produce something more visual like this. In terms of how you access that data, the individual components can be fed by API calls. So these are the exact same queries that we saw on the query tab. So it's a very simple set of key value pairs. You specify the table that you're interested, maybe some filters, maybe some aggregations. You can set it to refresh or not, and you've got some options around the actual finished product. So that is the very quick version of KDB Insights Enterprise. Happy to take questions at this stage.